All right, thank you. Sorry, it took a little bit of time there. I was trying to get the video set up. We don't have a guest in the studio, but we have his book, and this is a good one. I'm not the only one saying it's a good book either. It's a #1 book on Amazon in more than one category. Oh my gosh. I wasn't a good history student. I wish I could go back in time and take school again, because I'm way more interested in history now that I have history. Maybe that's the problem. You have to have history before you're interested in it, right?
Exactly.
Have you ever gone over the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and Tunnel? Have you ever done that?
I think I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
One time.
And so that's about all I know about Chesapeake Bay. That's all I know is that bridge and tunnel. But I've learned a lot more about the history in this book called Chesapeake Requiem. It's written by Earl Swift. He's on the phone with us right now. He's a journalist. He's a reporter for the Virginia Pilot newspaper. He's a contributor to Outside and numerous other magazines. And this is a story of a year with the watermen of vanishing Tangier Island. Yeah, they say I don't know if it's sinking or if it's being eroded or what. It's kind of interesting. So let's find out about this. Earl Swift. Good morning, Earl. Thank you for being on the air with us.
Larry.
Yeah. Hey.
Larry, thanks for having me. And hi, Robin.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you. So what's where are you? Are you there now? Are you in the Chesapeake area?
Well, I'm on a cell phone, and if I were on Tangier Island, Larry, we wouldn't be talking because there's no cell service there.
Okay.
It's one of those rare spots in the lower 48 that has never had cell service and won't have it for the foreseeable future either.
How soon before the whole thing is gone? Is it heading in that direction?
It is. It's a. Let me explain first. This is a lump of mud and marsh smack in the middle of the widest part of the Chesapeake Bay. It's a dozen miles from the nearest mainland town, and about 460 people live there, and they are descended from the first settlers on Tangier who moved to the island in 1778. So it's got a long history, and throughout its history, its people have made their living harvesting sea life, and most predominantly the oyster and the Chesapeake Bay blue crab. And for since 1850, the island has been steadily losing land, and that process has accelerated over the 20th century. It's now lost 2/3 of the land mass it had during the Civil War, and it is not only succumbing to the effects of sea level rise, namely wave-driven erosion, that's getting worse all the time. But the island, along with the rest of the southern Chesapeake Bay, is actually sinking. So you've got a 1-2 punch happening there, land going down, water coming up.
Wow.
And together those give the lower Chesapeake pretty much the highest relative sea level rise on Earth.
Wow. And how many people have lost their homes since the Civil War? That goes back a long way.
Kind of hard to say. There, I mean, entire settlements have been swallowed up. They're probably the thing about the island that's kind of interesting from a difficult way to live standpoint is that most of it is marsh, but 70% or better of it is wetlands that floods every high tide, and everybody is crammed onto 3 parallel sandy ridges. And when I say ridge, I don't mean something that you can actually see sticking up into the sky. They are just inches above the wetlands. But they provide dry ground most of the time. And so everybody's crammed on those. Well, several of those ridges have disappeared since 1850. They've already been swallowed up. And
wow.
The foundations of entire little villages are a couple fathoms underwater and well offshore now.
Yeah, I'm looking at I just went to Google Earth and found it on the map, and it looks like it's got a lot of big spots, I should say, with water just I guess taking over the island. Is the water rise issue across the whole planet? Do we see small islands like this going through the same thing everywhere?
Not to the dramatic degree you see on Tangier. Now, certainly down in the Maldives and the Seychelles, there are many places throughout the Indian Ocean and the Western Pacific where you see small island nations getting very vocal about the fact that they are losing land at an alarming rate. But you don't see it too often happening right before your eyes like you do on Tangier. It's
wow.
it's from 1 week to the next.
I just went to the Street View thing on Google. That's a pretty place. Oh my gosh. I hope we don't lose this. This is such a nice place. So you lived there for a year? Is that right?
I did. I moved to the island and stayed for 14 months and just kind of went native to the degree that I could, to the degree that anyone can. This is a place that's been so isolated for so long that they have their own style of speech. And believe me when I say that if you were to hear two Tangerman talking on marine radio, you would be lucky to pick out a word or two.
Really? Can you imitate? Can you show us or tell? Kind of imitate?
No way.
Well, how did you communicate?
I couldn't do it justice. Well, after a while, you get your ear tuned to it.
Okay.
I mean, I was there for long enough that I was able to decipher it after a bit. But a day tripper is not going to be able to make out much, and it's complicated also by the fact that they often say exactly the opposite of what they mean.
Oh my gosh.
So this isn't speech that they've acquired from their ancestors way back through the American Revolution. This is something from a world older than that.
No, the reporters for generations, Robin, have said that it's a vestige of Elizabethan English left over. It's not. It does have there are twinges of like a Cornish lilt, and a good many of the early settlers, or at least the 19th century settlers, were from Cornwall in England, and you can detect that. There's almost an Irish tang to it, when they say certain words and phrases, but really it's just it's a weird combination of the Tidewater accent, which is weird to begin with. Where you say a boot instead of about, and
are they going?
Every oi sound comes out an I. And
are they okay with you talking about them this way?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Oh, I think they're quite proud of their accent.
Usually that's the way it is. Yeah.
So, what will happen to the soft shell crab industry if that area goes away? Are those blue crabs going to migrate somewhere else along that coast, or is that kind of industry going to disappear?
Well, no, the blue crabs will not change their migration patterns. But it's not like they're migrating into the crab pots now. They'd like to stay out of it.
Right.
Sure. But if the islanders have kind of a uniquely advantageous spot to harvest blue crab, because you harvest them in fairly shallow water. They need seagrasses for cover, and you have both of those things in abundance just offshore in Tangier. And you're on an island. You can take your boat anywhere you want to go and put your pots pretty much wherever you want to put them. And so when the island leaves, it may not wipe out Tangier's contribution to the soft shell crab industry, but it's certainly going to take a hit. It'll just be much harder to do what they do every day if they're having to work from the mainland. And Tangermen catch more, they produce more soft shell crab than any other single town in Virginia. So, for a town of 460, that's saying something.
So what was life like? What was the culture like? Was it like any small town in this country? Was it completely different because of the disappearing element of the island? Was that kind of a source of anxiety for the people who live there?
Well, I'll take those questions in order.
I know. I give you more than one. Sorry.
That's fine. It was much like your typical American small town in some respects. It's got one grocery store. It's got a single ATM. It's got one cop.
Wow.
And it's very unlike your typical small town in others in that no one drives cars. The streets are as wide as sidewalks, and so everybody gets around by scooter and by golf cart. And it's deeply religious. It's
did I hear a goat?
Almost a theocracy of old school Christians. And when I say old school, I mean old school. The island traditionally has been an enclave of Methodism, but it's not like the Methodism that you see practiced on the mainland. This is really kind of a vestigial Methodism left over from Victorian times almost. in style. And the other big thing that sets it apart is that everybody is descended from that first settler who moved to the island in 1778. Anyone born on the island is a descendant of Joseph Crockett, meaning that this is one giant extended family and has been throughout its history, throughout its 240 years. So this is an island of cousins and closer. The
book is called Chesapeake Requiem, A Year with the Watermen of Vanishing Tangier Island. I want to make sure we don't miss I want to make sure we're fair to the book, but I have a question. I promise this is not going to be the whole line of questions. I'm looking at the island on Street View, and there's like a water machine on the side of the road. Is fresh water hard to come by?
They have a number of drills that go 1,000 feet down to an aquifer below the Chesapeake, and it's not hard to get. But the water that comes up is so loaded with sodium and barium and fluoride, naturally occurring fluoride, that the island's longtime doctor was in the habit of urging islanders not to drink it. And so islanders don't. A lot of islanders just forsake the water that comes out of the tap, and bottled water sells briskly there.
Wow.
Do the children of the islanders, do they want to, when they grow up and they become college age, do most of them stay there, or do they go over to somewhere else to get a higher degree education and stay on the mainland?
Well, that's a great question. And for most of its history, boys followed their fathers onto the water. They'd quit school in the 9th or 10th grade and become watermen themselves, get themselves a boat at age 19 or 20, and then spend the rest of their lives doing what their fathers had. And it went that way throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. And then until about, I guess, the mid 80s or so, and then you saw a shift. And near as I can tell, Robin, it like as is the case in Alaskan bush villages, in small towns, across the Midwest and the South, an exodus began. And if you were to tie it to one particular cause, on Tangier, I think satellite TV certainly played a role, where for the first time kids got the news that there was a heck of a lot easier and sexier way to make a living than standing on the pitching deck of a crab boat all day.
Wow.
And so you saw kids leave in increasing numbers throughout the 80s. And by the 90s, that trend was firmly in place. And now very few stick around the island. They all, they join the military, they go to work on tugboats, they go to college. And if you have a college degree, there's nothing to do with it when you come back. It used to be that maybe you could get a job at the school as a teacher. Tangier's got the only K through 12 single schoolhouse left in Virginia.
Gosh.
But the population has dropped along, that's eroded along with the island. And so those school teaching jobs are not going to be available probably ever again. And, the school's population has dropped from 102,000 to next year it'll be 53.
Is there any resentment on the part of the residents of the island toward the government regarding the erosion of the island? Do they feel like the government is not doing as much as they could?
Wow. I think there's great hope on the part of most islanders. They have a lot of faith, and that faith translates into faith in the government. But sure, there's a palpable frustration that things have not moved along as quickly as they might. And most of that frustration is directed at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which is in charge of, projects along the waterfront. And the Corps has a long history of studying Tangier's problem and not so glowing a history of actually doing something about it. And if you're on the island long enough, you come to understand why that frustration is, and you can, come to share it to some degree.
Does the book, or did your intent for the book, raise a red flag for us? I mean, do we need to start looking at these kinds of stories and maybe up our efforts to do whatever we need to do, environmentally speaking?
Yeah, I think you should have started doing it, 10 years ago. But you bet, this is a canary in the coal mine tale, and this is coming soon to a town near you, if not your town. We have 88,000 miles of coastline in the United States, and much of it's going to be imperiled over the next 50, 60 years. And 50, 60 sounds like all the time in the world. The kind of projects we're going to need to save ourselves are the kind of projects that are going to take 50, 60 years in some instances to put into place. So time is of the essence. And heck yes, this is a warning shot.
What did you and the residents do during your free time for fun?
I did a lot of reading. I caught up on my reading to a degree that I never have before. The thing, Tangier has a wonderful beach. Not many of the islanders use it. I found myself alone on the beach a lot. To tell you the truth, Robin, one of the biggest things is church. People go to church a lot on Tangier. I mean, in addition to the Sunday and Wednesday morning, or Sunday morning and Wednesday evening service, you've got Sunday evening, you've got men's prayer breakfasts, you've got class meetings. You've got choir practices. That takes up a significant portion of the week. It's also a social outlet for a great many of the islanders.
And how were you accepted when you went there? Because you must have had the book in mind to write.
Oh, I went there specifically to write a book, to report this story, and told anyone who asked, yes, I'm here to write a book. I was, they're a pretty media savvy bunch, because they've had reporters show up for a day or two and do their obligatory Tangier stories for decades. And they've become very accustomed to talking with reporters. What they weren't accustomed to was a reporter who stayed, and I think that once they became aware that I wasn't leaving, that I was, a month and a half in, say, they really accepted me. I was made to feel like, as one of their own. I hesitate to say I felt like a Tangierman, because, any come here can't really make that claim, but they were wonderfully generous to me, and great neighbors, and terrific hosts, and I really came to love the island and the people there a great deal.
Yeah, I mean, it just looks like the kind of a place that would definitely be a hospitable, where the people will be friendly and welcoming. For those who aren't looking at it and are driving or whatever, the best local place I can tell you about that this sort of resembles, it's kind of a cross between Cedar Key, which is a little island for Earl's sake, a little island off the coast of Florida on the Gulf Coast.
It's beautiful.
But the roads look as narrow as in the old part of St. Augustine. So there's if you put the narrow roads of St. Augustine into Cedar Key, it sort of looks like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a place that if you're unaccustomed to tidal salt marshes, you kind of have to recalibrate your senses to appreciate. It's got a very nuanced, quiet kind of beauty. It's essentially treeless. There are very few trees there, so you're looking at a very low wafer of land, just inches above the tide, that filled with birds, filled with insects as well, and. And the thing that you really come to appreciate over time is the play of light and breeze over the marsh, and the music of the marsh grass as it moves, and stuff like that. I moved to Virginia from Alaska, and it took me a while to kind of adjust my dial so that because in Alaska you're kind of beaten over the head with the beauty of what you're looking at. Here you have to kind of lean back and savor it and let it come to you.
Yeah.
Did your diet change at all?
Lots of crabs.
Ate a lot of crabs. And let me tell you, there's nothing like being on an oyster boat, pulling, with the guys who are dredging, two guys on a boat, dredging oysters in the middle of December.
Oh, wow.
Unbelievably cold. Water and spray sweeping over the deck and freezing anything it touches. And having one of those guys shuck an oyster and hand it to you and sucking down a raw oyster that was on the bottom 5 minutes before.
Oh my gosh. So you
pretty amazing.
So did you take some like menial labor jobs just to get get your hand on the pulse, I guess, of what it's like to actually earn a living there?
No. I had plenty of work full time to keep me busy, but I was there to do a story. So I was pretty much on that 24/7, but I did go out crabbing very frequently, and I went out oystering as well, and just rode with islanders in their boats whenever the opportunity arose. And so I lived the same kind of amphibious life, or tried to, as they do.
I mean, if it's uninhabitable by the year 2063, and if I was a young person looking to buy a house, oh my gosh, I could be in that house 40 years. I'm never going to sell that house. I might as well. I don't know. Is that the mindset of the young people who are there? I guess it's sort of the same question Robert asked earlier, but I'm just trying to imagine buying a home.
2063 is wildly optimistic. It's not going to be habitable until 2063.
Oh, I got that from my
researchers associated with the Army Corps of Engineers came out with a scientific paper that said that Tangier was likely to be uninhabitable in 50 years. And that's where that 2063 figure comes from. But since then, the lead author of that study has rightly said, look, we were using a middle case scenario for sea level rise that has already been proven to be way too conservative. And it looks like our worst case scenario is more likely. And with that, they have, if they're lucky, 25.
I'm guessing homeowners insurance, real estate sales, that's got to be almost non-existent.
Real estate sales are tough. One of the things that's an issue is that the population has dropped, and there are 60 some odd houses standing empty. Most of these houses you would not know are empty. You look at them; they're in great shape. But the islanders who have them, if they do want to sell, have a hard time getting anyone from the mainland, for instance, to buy. Even if you're just a weekender, you don't want to buy a house that you're borrowing for a pretty short amount of time.
Right. Yeah. Well, your book is doing so well. I just want to brag about it a little bit on Amazon. It is currently #1 in the South Atlantic category. Now, why is that South Atlantic? It's #1 in the Virginia category. It makes sense. It's #2 in lifestyles. And it's just a #1. It's listed as a #1 best-selling book. So I found it on Amazon. For those who want to go buy it, that's where I found it. It's not only a hardcover, it's a Kindle, and it's also an audiobook. Are you the voice?
No, thank God. No, I know my limitations, Larry, and there's a reason I type for a living.
I have a copy of the book. If I have a listener who would like it, give me a call right now, 622-9622, and I'll leave it here at the station for you.
That's fascinating.
I mean, we're at 80 feet above sea level, and we're probably the highest point in this part of Florida. Yeah. So we might not be that far behind. Well, thank you. That was an amazing conversation. Thank you for sharing that with us, Earl.
Well, thank you both. I've really enjoyed it. You asked good questions.
Do you have a website you want to direct us to?
Sure. EarlSwift.com. EarlSwift.
Easy enough. And I have somebody calling for the book. I'll have to take that call during the break. Earl, thank you for being on the air with us. That was fun.
Hey, Same here. Thanks.
Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. The president's called some key races for candidates he's backing, even though it's too close to call. The winner of a special election in Ohio and in Kansas, the Republican nominee for governor.
Michigan, the president's primary picks for governor and Senate both won. President Trump tweeting congratulations to Attorney General Bill Schuette, who won the gubernatorial primary. President predicting a big win in November for him and a return of car companies if Schuette wins. And in the Senate race, Iraq War veteran John James, who the president calls a future star of the Republican Party, will face Democrat incumbent Debbie Stabenow.
Fox's Griff Jenkins. And a manhunt underway after 2 officers are ambushed in Camden, New Jersey.
Undercover cops, undercover